Alrighty, on today's episode of Faith and Focus, I want to talk a little bit about the scandal that around the show The Chosen and the pride flag thing. And I want to talk about another story about Hillsong, seemingly unrelated, but the reason I want to connect these two is because I want to talk about an overriding principle that I think can help alleviate some of the tension that a lot of Christians feel when it comes to issues like this. So that's what we're going to talk about on this episode. If you've been a listener of Faith and Focus for a while, I would encourage you to become a supporter of the ministry by becoming a monthly donor. Your generous donations allow me to continue working within Faith and recording new content. You can find a link to my donation page in the show notes for this episode. Thank you. Alrighty, as I said in the opening, this huge scandal surrounding the show, and it's around the show The Chosen. It's not the first time there's been a scandal kind of percolating around the show, and there's various reasons for it, and I'll kind of delve into those a little bit too. But the more important thing is I want to talk about a principle that I think can really help us Christians navigate through a lot of this kind of confusing mess of situations. And the reason why situations like this are confusing is because we argue about them. We try to fight, like, what is the best course of action? So kind of lets us know that this is a murky gray area in dealing with some of this stuff. So as I said in the opening, the story with The Chosen kind of broke concerning a pride flag that was on set. And I also want to connect it to an article about Hillsong music. So having given just that brief introduction, I want to dive right into it because there's a lot going on in these stories, and I want to be able to give a little bit of context as I read through these stories. So let's just jump right into first this Hillsong story. And this is by a woman named Caitlin Beatty. And I became aware of Caitlin's work because of a book, Celebrities for Jesus, a really good book about how we in Christianity within the past 150 years have really bought into this celebrity culture. And it's a very kind of worldly way of accomplishing things, of getting things done, as you have like the Superman, the hero, the celebrity, the champion, somebody that everyone can look up to. And we've kind of modeled that within Christianity, and I think to our detriment. And I think Caitlin Beatty gives a good synopsis of how we got here and the dangers of why we shouldn't follow that way of thinking. But she also speaks a lot to big, huge institutional things within Christianity, and Hillsong Church she's written quite a bit about, and some of the scandals circulating around that. But I have subscribed to her Substack, which I'll include in the show notes, the Beatty Beat. But she says in this article that just came out on May 31st, it's time to stop singing Hillsong music. We know too much to act as if all that matters is how it makes us feel. And so that kind of connected with me because I kind of thought, like, man, I think a lot of the times we sing music within Christianity because it makes us feel good. We don't necessarily question, does the character of who wrote this matter? Does the content of the song matter? Or does it just matter what we feel? So that kind of connected with me, and I read this and I thought, that has a lot to do with this Chosen story. So I wanted to bring them together. So she says, sometime in the late 1990s, my church started singing Shout to the Lord. I remember it vividly because there was this one woman who would raise her hands when we got to the big key change. You know the one. I had theretofore not seen many people throw their hands up at our church, but it seemed authentic and powerful and like something you would want to have happen to you. We were a Methodist church. She kind of talks about her background. Methodist church. They started singing around the same time a lot of churches did. Better Is One Day by Matt Redman. Open the Eyes of My Heart, Michael W. Smith. And she talks about, again, her past contemporary Christian music was the soundtrack to her evangelical upbringing. And she says, I didn't know that Shout to the Lord was written by Australian singer-songwriter Darlene Zschech, sorry, probably butchering that name, in 1993. 2 years later, Zschech became the worship leader at Hills Christian Life Centre, a Pentecostal congregation in New South Wales, Australia. The worship band Hillsong became so popular that the church changed its name to match it. Hillsong music is the primary and profitable way Hillsong culture imports itself to churches the world over. It is estimated that 30 million churches still sing Shout to the Lord today. Hillsong is one of just 4 churches, along with Bethel, Elevation, and Passion City Church, today that dominate the worship charts and define the genre. Other things were happening at Hillsong around the time our church started singing that song. So one of the things that just right out of the gate that I think is important, and I think this is why it's on Caitlin Beatty's radar, is because, as she said, all of these millions and millions of churches sing all of these same songs. I haven't linked over to see what article she's linking to when she talks about, Bethel, Elevation Music, Hillsong. They dominate these charts, but it's probably one similar to the one I saw the other day, where it's like the top 25 contemporary Christian music songs being sung by churches, being played in churches and played on radios and stuff like that. It was like 23 of them were all from these just 4 churches or worship bands of these churches. So she's right that these churches are changing the culture of the church around the world, and they're doing it primarily through their worship. So it's not a minor thing. They are, and this is one of the reasons why I've kind of kept a skeptical, maybe not skeptical, cynical, if I'm being honest, eye towards Hillsong, is because they are the headwaters of the river that is the church culture. I said on a previous episode that you go to a lot of seeker-friendly churches, or very traditional, kind of modern churches. Maybe that's a contradiction. Typical modern churches is what I mean. Just a very, they got their coffee bar. They've got, the pastor wears flip-flops, and you know what I'm talking about. That kind of church. They all kind of model. They're all kind of trying to be Hillsong, it seems like. And it becomes apparent when you watch videos of Hillsong churches. The people kind of dress the same, and then that trickles down into modern churches trying to emulate that culture. So the mottos are all kind of the same thing. You belong here, welcome home. These kind of mottos that you probably see at your church, or your church puts up on banners. These things all come from Hillsong. That's like the headwater of all of this stuff. So the music being the same thing. So it's not an insignificant situation. And so she goes on. Evangelistic Wreckage in 1999, Hillsong founding pastor Brian Houston learned that his father, Assemblies of God pastor Frank Houston, had sexually abused a child in the 1970s. And so he bars him from preaching, but in this deposition that Houston is now on trial on for failing to disclose the abuse, he surmised that his father was a, quote, serial pedophile and will probably never know the extent of it. So, many other bad things, she says, have tumbled out from Hillsong. Brian Houston has just resigned last March after an internal investigation found inappropriate behavior towards 2 women. 2 years prior to that, New York City Hillsong pastor Carl Lentz stepped down after confessing to infidelity. He was accused by former nannies. If you've seen Hillsong exposed in a lot of these documentaries, they go into a lot of this stuff. And she says, this is only what we know as the public know. Let us not forget the 150,000 congregants who have reportedly been a part of Hillsong community at one time. For people who loved Hillsong, who were active and devoted members, who trusted its leaders, who sacrificed their time and talents in service of its mission, there must be such deep grief, a sense of betrayal, cognitive dissonance. How could this church that blessed me also harm so many people? How could a tree that looked healthy bear such bad fruit? One of the things, just as a sidebar, that Caitlin Beatty writes about in Celebrities for Jesus is she talks about these Carl Lentz types, these Brian Houstons that are so massive celebrity talents that they go unchecked. There's nobody to challenge them. Anyone who tries to challenge them gets suppressed, kicked out, marginalized. The distrust, the institution gets turned against those people. So it's very toxic for leaders in and of itself. So she says, so that our churches don't pile onto the scandal and offense and create further barriers for people experiencing the love and trustworthiness and radical humility of Jesus, it's time to stop singing Hillsong music in our churches. So she says, follow the money. The question, can you separate the art from the artist, is both perennial and newly charged in light of a broader cultural reckoning over abuse. Basically, can we still enjoy the good art of terrible people? Can I still listen to Michael Jackson songs on Spotify? Must I self-flagellate while watching Hannah and Her Sisters, one of my truly favorite movies? I have no polling to back this up, but my hunch is that Christians are prone to say, yes, we can still honor the good work of someone who did otherwise sinful, criminal, heinous things. That is because Christians are people of forgiveness who believe that people are more than the worst things they've done, and that God can still use broken people and systems to do otherwise beautiful work. And she talks about King David. These people, we still read their psalms and sing their psalms. So my argument for why we should stop singing Hillsong music in church is two-pronged. The first prong is about money. The second is about being above reproach. One, money. If your church licenses Hillsong music for worship, you are one branch of the Hillsong tree, regardless of whether your average churchgoer knows it. In my view, that tree is now diseased and unhealthy that must be felled. That means the music must go with it. So basically, essentially, her argument is whether you're listening to it on Spotify or whether you're licensing it to sing it. And I don't know if you know this. I guess, this seems ridiculous to me, but Hillsong is a business. They make money. They're tax free. They should be honest and say we're a business and pay taxes like everybody else. But Hillsong Music, they're a business, so they're putting out content. So technically, if your church is singing Hillsong music, they're supposed to be paying for the rights to do that. They have to buy those licenses to do that, which again I think seems ridiculous. But it's the world we live in. So she's saying like, hey, listen, the Hillsong brand, the Hillsong name, it is so disease-ridden in its top leadership. We just have to cut ties with it. It would be akin to like, in your local church, if you've got, when Jesus says things like, a little leaven leavens the whole lump, or when Paul talking to the Corinthians will say things like, if one part's sick, we're all sick. Like you can't separate out. Well, that's that person's sin problem. There reaches a point where, the sickness of sin or a bad reputation or whatever, this rot that is taken over that she's saying in Hillsong, you have to just basically cut that off. You say we can't associate. We can't financially support this multi-million-dollar global enterprise anymore. We're just going to cut it off. Or on your Spotify, when you listen to it on Spotify, that money goes to them. You are continuing to fund this organization. So she's saying for that reason, we should cut them off. She continues on. She says, to Church Witness, she says a new Barna survey found that Americans have a very low view of famous or well-known worship bands. Famous people or celebrities who are Christians, celebrity pastors in megachurches. It's ironic that so many churches have used celebrity to attract people to the church, only to have celebrity be the very thing that repels many people from it. So she goes and talks about, this, classic stories of people who've fallen into sin, and she talks about how, hey, listen, church leadership is supposed to be above reproach. That's one of the things that they're called upon to do. And the reason is a very pragmatic reason. Like, if you are wanting to win outsiders, but the person leading the group has a very bad reputation with the outsiders, they're going to say, why should we come here? This person's a criminal or a swindler or a drunk or an abuser or whatever it might be. Very, heinous sins that might be laid at the feet. And this is obviously a gray area. There's no hard and fast rules because we all are fallen. I know the things that, that I do, the attitudes I have, I would hate for my behavior to repel people from Christ, and we all fall somewhere on that. No one's perfect. So we all fall somewhere on that spectrum. But if a person is to the point where it's like they're repelling people from Christ, well then, okay, we're not saying that you're worse than other people, but your behavior has created a barrier or a stumbling block. And Jesus said, hey, don't put up stumbling blocks to prevent people from coming to faith. And if a person's character is so bad that they are now a stumbling block and they're preventing people, you got to remove them for a lot of reasons, but one of them being practical. And so the second reason she says is, listen, Hillsong, especially in light of all the documentaries that have come out, the scandal surrounding them, the disdain people have for like these ultra rich celebrity pastors, people not liking that, being turned off by that. She said, for that reason alone, you don't want to have, somebody come in, you're singing these songs, and all of a sudden it pops up at the end, buy Hillsong. It's like, oh, these people support this, church that I saw was just, founded by, this father serial pedophile guy that the pastor covered it. That is her main point is, the money, and then this. You should cut it off. You should stop associating, essentially. 1 Corinthians, 5 or 6? Just don't associate with them. We got to cut them off. So that's the first story. That's the first one I'd like to bring up. Then the second one is this article from the Daily Wire on The Chosen. So you've probably seen this already. The Chosen defends pride flag spotted on set. Let the show speak for itself. So if you're not aware of what has happened, there was a promotional, and I won't delve into the background of this too much, but there was a promotional video that went out for The Chosen, and it was promoting season 4. They're filming season 4, and so it was kind of getting behind the scenes stuff, and on one of the camera crews was this pride flag in the background, and so people freaked out. What is this pride flag doing on the set? So this article says official social media account for The Chosen defended the appearance of a rainbow flag, claiming that the endorsement from at least one team member would not affect the theological rigor of the project. The Chosen, a multi-season, okay, we don't need to read that, but they've come under fire because they, partnering and having involving non-Christians, groups from Mormons, and obviously Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus, is Catholic. So some Protestants are like, oh, Catholics can't be associated with Catholics. So so this is not a new thing for the show The Chosen. And says Turning Point USA contributor and former sports reporter John Root asked The Chosen to explain the presence of the pride flag. An official social media account said the initiative uses the work for those of varying beliefs about Jesus, but insisted that the project would still be accurate and honor his life ministry. So they said, just like our hundreds of cast and crew who have different beliefs or no belief at all than we do, we will work with anyone on our show who helps us portray and honor the authentic Jesus, the statement said. We ask that audiences let the show speak for itself and focus on the message, not the messenger, because we will always let you down. Okay, I mean, you could probably say a couple things about that, but Root pressed The Chosen to answer whether it's God-honoring to promote a symbol that represents sexual morality, a worldly redefinition of marriage, and the idea that we can change our biological sex, noting that the controversy comes shortly before the start of Pride Month. Shouldn't every part of the show be biblically based to truly honor the authentic Jesus? If you stand by having a pride flag on your set, you're not a Christian show, Root added. You are a production that happens to be about Jesus while catering to the sin of this fallen world. The Chosen generated controversy last year when the show's depiction of Jesus said, I am the law of Moses. That's from the Book of Mormon. It's not from the Bible. And so Jenkins had to field that. And so that's the controversy. And if you're not aware of that, then you're probably not keyed into what's going on with The Chosen. You probably don't watch the show already. But one of the things that I've been saying for a while to people, because people have been asking this question, like, oh man, I knew people that found out that not everyone who works on the show is a Christian. Some of the actors are not Christians who are portraying these people. There's different sects of Christianity that maybe I don't agree with. Oh no, what are you supposed to do with that? And well, okay, you have to understand, this isn't a church, it's a business, and that's one of the things that Dallas Jenkins says. We're not operating a church here, we're operating, this filmmaking company. And so what I've told people is it seems kind of somewhere in the middle that Dallas Jenkins, the creator, kind of almost seems to play both sides. He kind of pretends like it's a ministry when he needs money from Christians. But he will come out very openly and say, we're not a ministry. We are making a show about Jesus. I could see how people could see oh man, it seems like it's kind of, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, and fair enough. But the reason why, to me, I think this is an issue that is fraught with such controversy is because there is such gray area about how do you handle these kinds of things. I face this. I was talking with someone the other day with being with a staff with InFaith. As a missionary, I have a lot of latitude to do my ministry, and I don't have a lot of oversight. Now, sometimes that's hard to know. Where does my ministry end and my life begin? Social media accounts. Am I allowed to post certain things, or is that my ministry, or is that not my ministry? Am I allowed to say things? Am I representing InFaith when I do this? So does that mean I have to be on all the time, 24/7? where does my ministry end within faith and my just life begin? Am I allowed to spend time with certain kinds of people? If I'm like, this is not ministry, I'm just hanging out with these people, whatever. Like all these kinds of questions people ask, and The Chosen is no different. Christian businesses, the same thing. Christian owners, how much do I need to reflect my Christian values in this thing? Christian parachurch organizations, rather, that are not churches, but they are organizations that help and assist the church, like a Samaritan's Purse, something like that. Are they allowed to hire non-believers? Well, is it a church or is it a Christian ministry? Well, it's a Christian ministry, but I don't know. What are you supposed to do? In churches, can churches have, some churches are just like, they have a philosophy of like belong before you believe sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, if you don't know Jesus, come in here and play drums. We don't need someone to know Jesus to play drums. I have some issues with that, but that's the mentality of like, where do people need to be in their spiritual walk to be involved in Christian organizations? And like, as I said, the story with The Chosen seemingly has nothing to do with the Hillsong thing, but I'm going to bring them together. So with The Chosen thing, Dallas has since released a video addressing this, and he has basically said, listen, we are a business. We're making a show. We hope that the product can minister to people, and certainly it does, but we have people, we work with all kinds of people. And he made the point to say, like, listen, what people believe on set, the clothing people wear, whether it's a MAGA hat or a pride flag or whatever, that doesn't reflect the mission of The Chosen. It's the person. And he made the point too, which is a fair enough point. He says these are independent contractors. It's not like they are being employed directly by The Chosen. Just like all movie sets, the actors they're just employees. It would be like, somebody having a pride flag at their desk or something that someone might find objectionable at their desk. And so they're independent contractors, so they're not really directly employed by this. And you can kind of understand, there's a spectrum in all of this stuff. There's a sliding scale of, okay, well, how Christian does a person have to be associated with anything that might be considered Christian, or a Christian movie company, or a ministry, or a church, or whatever? Your church, if your church was adding an addition, and you hired independent contractors to come in and build your thing, and one of them walked on the set or walked on the construction site and was wearing a pride flag, and then someone took a picture and said, oh, look, this church is being built by somebody with a pride flag on it. It's like, is that allowed? Can you have no people who don't love Jesus? Must only people who love Jesus be building churches? So my point in trying to throw out these examples is there's this wide spectrum of what organizations and entities are called, how they function. And within that, you could go as radical as a church that should only be staffed and ministry should only be done by Christians. Well, in that case, then, again, could you have an independent contractor come in and help you put up some drywall? I guess so. All the way down to The Chosen, which isn't a church. It's just a movie company. But it's, a lot of Christians on staff putting out Christian content, whatever, a life story about Jesus. Can you have an independent contractor filming it? Can you have independent contractors portraying the people on the scene? So there's this wide spectrum. That is my point. And it's the spectrum, I think, that is the point. And this is how it ties into the Hillsong story. With the Hillsong story, there's the spectrum. Okay, what does above reproach mean? How far removed from the organization do you have to be? Okay, if it's in your church, somebody working in your church might be above reproach. But what if you're partnering with another church and they have somebody who's not above reproach? Do you need to distance yourself? Well, what about if 10 churches are partnering under the umbrella of Samaritan's Purse or something like that? And Samaritan's Purse has somebody who's not above reproach. Do you need to distance yourself from them? That's my point, is wide spectrums, and different organizations have different definitions of who can work there, and does the is this fruit of the poisonous tree, so to speak? If you associate with that organization, does it rub off on you, and are you affected? Does it taint the work that God's doing? All of those questions, I think, fall under this rubric of Romans chapter 14. I think a good passage to go to when thinking about these things is Romans 14. As for the one who's weak in faith, welcome him, but do not quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may... And remember, this is in the context of the local church. Paul's saying to have this attitude. So when you start branching out and you're dealing with parachurch organizations or businesses, Christian organizations, I mean, it probably even gets even more broad, but we're talking about in the actual local church. Paul's saying you have this. One person believes he can eat anything, while a weak person believes he can only eat vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. One person esteems one day as better than the other, while another esteems all days alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. The one who observes the day observes it to honor the Lord. The one who eats in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the one who abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. None of us lives to himself, none of us dies to himself. So this whole point of Romans chapter 14, and I'm not going to go through the whole chapter, it continues into chapter 15, is that within the local church, you have a broad spectrum of things that are disputable matters, gray areas, and again, that's not to say that, you might be able to say like, okay, well, promoting homosexual lifestyles and pride flags, that's not a gray area, that's a moral absolute. Yes, but somebody who is associated with a product or a project that you're working on, not a part of the church, not a part of, like all these things, are you promoting that? Well, it's hard to tell. It's like, those are disputable. Is it disputable to say you're promoting it? Is it disputable to say you're partnering with it? I don't know. Is it disputable to say, hey, somebody who's going to come in and build a wall for my church doesn't know Jesus? We just need someone to build a wall. I mean, we want to glorify God with the church building, but if you can put up drywall cheaper than the next guy, well, we don't care. We don't care what your beliefs are about filming a scene that has to do with Jesus. Those are the things that are disputable matters. And so I would encourage you, go and take a look at Romans chapter 14 and just understand that Paul's saying within the church, with what should be the most sacred of all of these things. I mean, again, you start to go into parachurch organizations, Christian businesses, Christian organizations, and all these sorts of things. It seems that the boundaries get a little bit looser. But even within the church, there's these disputable matters. And his point is, with the eating in the days and all this kind of stuff, it would be the situation that was going on was people thinking, if I eat this meat that may have been sacrificed to an idol, that makes me guilty of idol worship. And some people are like, that doesn't make you guilty of idol worship. Just eat the steak. Just eat the bacon, whatever it might be. Or, man, if I work on Saturday, I'm violating the Sabbath. And people are like, I don't care about violating the Sabbath. I got bills to pay. So there's these different mentalities. And we're coming together in the church. And Paul's saying, and Paul does give his opinion on who he thinks is right and those kinds of things. But his mentality is like, listen, we can't judge or disdain or look down on other people in these areas of disputable matters. So with this Hillsong stuff, should Christians listen to Hillsong? Should they not? I could have brought up Disney. I mean, Disney is kind of wrapped up in all this stuff now. Should Christians watch Disney? Should Christians support Disney? Should they go to Disneyland? Should they spend money on, all that kind of stuff? Should Christians watch The Chosen? Should they not? Is this a bridge too far? What if you've got actors on The Chosen speaking out in favor of supporting, gay pride stuff. Is that a bridge too far? Now you've got an actor who's speaking out on this. These are all disputable things. And my point is the overarching principle that should govern this is if you're just looking at things from a law perspective, that if a Christian organization has a pride flag on set, whatever, or they have a non-believer who puts up a walls at a church, or they have, the leadership of a church sins this much, so you can't be associated with them. If you just have these laws in place and you're just waiting for that law to be violated and then boom, we're done, we're cutting off. That's not what the Christian life is about. The Christian life is a dynamic relationship with the living God. So what each of us should be doing, so parents with their children, when it comes to things like Disneyland, Disney World, watching Disney movies, when it comes to church leaders and Christians listening to Hillsong music, in your own vehicle, your own Spotify playlist, whatever it might be, watching The Chosen, showing The Chosen at your church, all of these things should be done through an attitude of prayer. You need to be asking the Lord, is this still acceptable? Is this okay? Is this fine? Am I crossing a line here? Would you rather me not? Because guess what? God has wisdom and insight. Maybe you know that. He's omniscient. He's all-knowing. He's all-wise. God knows your situation, and he knows the context that you're in. He knows whether or not, listen, hey, this is a bridge too far. I don't want you watching this program anymore, or I don't want you showing this program at church for these reasons. But he might give liberty to another Christian where he doesn't give you. So Caitlin Beatty may not have freedom to listen to Hillsong anymore, and she might advocate, hey, listen, she can make her case. Paul says we need to be persuaded in our own minds. So that doesn't mean that these things aren't open for debate. We should be trying to, hey, you should really reconsider, doing X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean that you can't try to persuade people. God may want to speak through you to try to persuade a brother or sister who's maybe not listening to the Spirit as closely as he or she should. But the point being, you should be persuaded in your own mind. You know what? Listen, I'm confident in the Lord. It's okay to partner with Hillsong and buy their music and all that kind of stuff and support them. I'm not associating with them. I'm happy to tell people if they ask questions, hey, listen, we just listen to their music. We don't support what they do. We condemn them, whatever. Same thing with Chosen. Hey, listen, I view it as a business. I don't view it as a Christian ministry. We might use what they do as a Christian ministry, but, each Christian has to be convinced in his own mind. And then the next thing is, guess what? You can't judge a Christian if they do the thing that you don't think they should be allowed to do. If you see a church playing Hillsong music or people listening to Hillsong in their car, or you see somebody watching The Chosen, you can't say, well, don't you know they support X, Y, and Z? You are not even saved if you would, you're not allowed to do that. Now, if you're not sure, again, this is done within the body of Christ. If you don't know him from Adam or her from Eve, whatever, who cares? Let it go. It's not your business. You don't know them. You have no influence on them. But if a brother or sister in your orbit, you might be concerned about, do they have all the information? Do they really know? Okay, you might want to talk to them. But if they're like, I've thought about it, I've prayed about it, and I think it's okay, I'm fine with it, then you know what? You can't judge them. You just got to let it go. And then the conservative, what we would call the conservative person who's like, I'm not doing The Chosen. That's a bridge too far for me. You know what? You can't condemn them. You can't look down on them, person who might have that freedom. And you shouldn't be putting stumbling blocks in front of them. Paul says, whatever is not from faith is sin. So if a person doesn't believe that they have the freedom to listen to Hillsong, watch The Chosen, whatever it might be, you shouldn't be like, come on, just do it. It's not a big deal. It's like, hey, listen, I'm going to respect your decision. So there's this mutual respect, mutual understanding, and a mutual upholding of each other, understanding that we all live in this mess of, is this sin rubbing off on me? Am I getting too, we have to have an attitude of understanding. That is what I think the principle that I think more than anything, we as Christians should be challenging one another with is, listen, are you seeking the Lord on this? Not, let's argue about the thing itself. Should Christians watch The Chosen anymore? Christians should, whatever. Okay, that's too broad of a brush. There may be situations and circumstances that we don't know about. So what we need to be doing is challenging one another. Hey, are you seeking the Lord on this thing? And if they are, hands off. Let the Lord deal with them. If they're violating their conscience, if they're violating what God has told them, you know what? God will be able to sort that out. It's not you or my position to do that. They will stand before their own master, and he will deal with them as his servant. So that's what I have for you. I know it's probably not a neat little bow on the should you listen to Hillsong, should you go to Disney World or watch Disney movies, should you watch The Chosen because X, Y, and Z. That's not my point. I don't want to try to convince any of you on what you should or should not do. I would hope that the scriptures, Romans 14, would convince you that this is an issue between you or your family and the Lord. Let the Lord decide for you. And whatever he decides, that's what it is. That's what we're going to do. So that's what I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a good one. While Faith in Focus is a ministry of mine as a missionary with InFaith, the views and opinions expressed, believed, or lived out by myself or those appearing in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the position, beliefs, or opinions of InFaith as a mission.